In the last section, we used the campaign factory to deploy a new campaign. If we now click on the Get Deployed Campaigns button, we should see the address of our newly deployed campaign appear. So now that we've got our campaign, we can go back over to our project where we can use our factory instance to get a list of all those deployed campaigns. And we're saying list right here, but as we well know, right now there's only one deployed campaign. Once we get that data, we can use a React component to display that list of campaigns on the screen. So let's get to it. Back inside of my code editor, I'm going to open up the pages index.js file. So here it is on the screen. Remember, this is intended to be where we display a list of all of the active campaigns. So inside of this file, we're going to want to use our factory instance to get a list of all those addresses and then use the React component to display them on the screen. Let's give it a shot. The first thing we need to do inside of here is make sure that we import our factory instance, which we've already created inside of that factory.js file. So I will import factory from up1 directory, ethereum, factory, like so. Now we need some location to fetch this data. Right here we've got the factory instance, but we need to actually call our method getDeployedCampaigns off that factory at some point in time. For that, we're going to redefine our component right here from a functional component to a class-based component. When we do that, we can then make use of the lifecycle method componentDidMount, which is a great place to load up some data inside of a React component. Once we do that data loading, we can then somehow render it out to the user so they can see that content appear on the screen. So let's replace this functional component with a class-based one instead. I'm going to say class campaign index. So that's just going to be the name of my component. I kind of picked it at random. There's nothing special about the name. Extends component, like so. We're using the component-based class here from the React library, so let's remember to import that from React at the top. Don't forget to get your curly braces on the import. Next, we can define our componentDidMount method. We're definitely going to end up with some asynchronous code inside this method, so let's make sure that we mark this thing as being asynchronous. Then we can use our factory instance to call our getDeployedCampaigns function. So I'm going to call await factory.methods.getDeployedCampaigns.call. So this is going to retrieve an array of the addresses of all of our deployed campaigns. And right now there's just one, but hey, eventually we'll have many. We need to assign this to a variable, so I'm just going to say const campaigns is that, like so. And then I think for right now, maybe we should just add a console log and attempt to log out that list of campaigns, just to make sure that our component right here is working the way we expect. So I'll say console.log campaigns. Whenever we make a React component, we do have to return some JSX from the render method. So even though we're not going to make use of this data just yet, we do have to put out some minimum amount of JSX. Otherwise, we're going to get an error thrown. So just to make React happy, we're going to define the render method. And from there, I will return a div that says campaigns index. And again, this is just to get something on the screen so we don't get an error message. Now there's one last thing I want to tell you about this pages directory. We've had a couple of words about the pages directory, but last thing I want to mention about it is that whenever Next imports a file from this directory, it's always going to expect that that file exports a React component. So it's not enough that we just defined a React component inside of here. We have to actually export it from this file. Otherwise, Next is going to throw an error and say, hey, you didn't actually export a component from this file. So at the bottom, we'll be sure to add an export statement for the campaign index component that we just made. So I'll say export default campaign index. Now one quick thing I want to mention to you, the word campaign is very easy to misspell. It's really easy to actually type it out as basically campaign, like you see right here. So I do encourage you to do a quick check over this component and make sure that you have properly spelled campaign in all locations. Once you've got that done, we'll save this file and test it out inside the browser. Before we tab over to the browser, I want to mention that right now we are going to see an error message when we try to render this thing inside the browser. Okay, so I want you to just be aware we will see an error message. But that's totally fine. It's actually going to lead in very nicely to a very important topic that we need to discuss. So let's now flip over to the browser and see that error message. All right, I'll go back over to my localhost 3000. Over here, you might initially see a message that says nothing was returned from render. This is erroneous right here. So this is an error message that is being caused because of the hot module reload system that is included with Next. So this is not the error message we were looking for. The message that we really want to see will pop up after we try to refresh the page. So I'm going to click on reload. And then we'll see the message that we really wanted to see, which is window is not defined. Like I said, we definitely expected this, but it definitely is going to have a very nice segue into a very important topic that we need to discuss about next. So let's pause right here. We're going to come back in the next video and we'll talk about exactly why we are seeing this nasty error message.